This is the IBJ podcast for the week of Monday, January 19th, 2026, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I can say with a high degree of certainty that IBJ hasn't reported this much news about the business of professional football since Indianapolis hosted the Super Bowl in 2012. Here's the pregame breakdown. The Chicago Bears won a new stadium. They say Soldier Field isn't cutting it anymore. They've purchased a huge site in one of Chicago's suburbs that formerly was home to a racetrack. The team says it's willing to pay for stadium construction, which could be as much as $3 billion. But the team needs the Illinois Legislature to help pave the way with about $855 million in infrastructure improvements and by approving a bill that would enable a long-term property tax deal. In December, Bears president and CEO Kevin Warren announced that the team wasn't getting anywhere with the Illinois Legislature and that it was expanding its search for a new stadium site to include Northwest Indiana. Indiana Governor Mike Braun and local officials in the area immediately jumped at the opening and the chance to get the ball rolling. Now, there was a healthy amount of skepticism that the Bears were name-checking Indiana simply to get leverage with Illinois. But several surprising developments in the last 2 weeks show that Indiana is moving quickly to lay the groundwork for a stadium. The Bears are giving the state serious consideration, and that some Illinois officials are seriously concerned about losing the team. In this episode of the podcast, we're going to review the plays made by the Bears and Indiana officials that have brought us to this point. We have two guests. We'll first hear from Mark Gannis, a consultant for pro sports teams who has lived in Chicago for 3 decades. Then we'll hear from Mickey Shuey, who covers real estate and sports business for IBJ. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Mark Gannis, president and co-founder of Chicago-based sports consulting agency Sports Corp Limited. Mark, thanks so much for making time today.
My pleasure.
Let me quickly establish your bona fides. Now, you have been involved in other stadium deals for NFL teams. You are not involved in the Bears' current effort to get a new stadium. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So my first question, why do the Bears want a new stadium? They currently lease Soldier Field, which was extensively renovated a little more than 20 years ago. I see them on TV. Looks great. Why do they want a new stadium?
The Soldier Field was economically obsolete before the concrete tried on the renovations. It is one of the smallest stadiums in the NFL. It has limited luxury or executive space, corporate space. It's the deal with the public sector, with the city and the park district here in Chicago, limits the Bears' revenue opportunities. For example, Soldier Field has no naming rights deal, limits advertising opportunities, limits Bears opportunities from other events that take place in the building, limits what the Bears can do for capital improvements to the building, limits the Bears' control over operations in the building from security staff and ushers and that kind of thing. It is both an economically obsolete building, and it is an operationally obsolete building as 21st century Major League Football or even baseball stadiums go.
Got it. So in 2023, the Bears bought 326 acres in the suburb of Arlington Heights, about 30 miles northwest of Soldier Field, for nearly $200 million, with an eye toward developing a state-of-the-art stadium and entertainment district. I know that the Bears had interest in at least one other site, but can we say that the Arlington Heights site is now their only focus for Illinois?
It is their only focus right now in Illinois. None of the Chicago sites that have been proposed are viable for a variety of reasons. The lakefront site that was originally proposed had a number of problems with it, not the least of which is a long-standing lakefront protection ordinance, which does not allow development east of Lakeshore Drive, so that the lakefront is kept open and free for the public forever. And that is actually one of the things that has kept the Chicago lakefront so pristine and so magnificent for so long. And we had a situation a few years ago where George Lucas and Melody Hobson, his wife, offered to build a $1 billion museum to the filmed arts just east of Lakeshore Drive, where the Bears had proposed to build their stadium, and they got rejected. So you had a situation where a contributed $1 billion museum on the museum campus was rejected because they couldn't get beyond the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. So there was really no feasible way that there was going to be a new football stadium east of Lakeshore Drive. There were a couple of other sites looked at. Some may have had more promise than others, but in the end, building within the urban environment of downtown Chicago is very expensive. Infrastructure, very expensive. Parking, very expensive. Relocation, very expensive. And then you have some security concerns, especially in this day and age where you have high rises that are nearby, or you have railroad tracks that may need to be realigned that are also cause problems. So this was the one viable site. And I will add, it's a great site. The Arlington Heights site is, these things come around almost never, where you have 300 plus acres of developable land that is basically in the middle of your season ticket base, that has highway access right to it, is used to having crowds of 60,000 people coming to it, has rail tracks right next to it. This was almost sent down from the gods as Chicago Bears. This is your site for your stadium that you haven't been able to have in 100 years of your existence, where you can build your own stadium and own it. It is the best possible site. And to the Bears' credit, they snapped it up.
Okay. The corporate offices and practice facilities are currently in Lake Forest, Illinois, and that's a bit north of Chicago. Would those move to the new stadium site as well, or would those remain separate?
They could remain separate. It's a really good facility they built. It was originally part of Lake Forest College. Some of it still is, but the Bears have built a very nice complex up there. It's also easy for the McCaskey family. It's easy for the players, and it keeps a lot of the players outside of downtown Chicago, where sometimes that's not the best place for athletes. Young, very rich, very good looking athletes to spend their evenings.
I can understand. So, what kind of deal have the Bears been shopping the Illinois legislators? What do they want from the state to make the project happen, and what do they say they're willing to kick in or pay for?
In a nutshell, the Bears have proposed that they will pay for the stadium, they will pay for the upkeep of the stadium, they will contribute the land, and what they are looking for is infrastructure in the range of $850 million. And they want to have a cap on property taxes for the complex. Uh, and that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Right. And my understanding of this is fuzzy, but if the legislature apparently would have to pass some kind of legislation that would give them the ability to negotiate directly with Arlington Heights for how much they would pay in property taxes and giving them, I think, what they call reasonable property tax certainty.
Right. The Illinois is a bit of an odd state in that it does not allow local property taxing bodies to um, uh, create, say, payments in lieu of taxes or that kind of thing without specific state legislation. Now, it's been granted in many cases. Chicago, for example, has been granted multiple tax increment financing districts, and that they've taken advantage of for to enhance development. But that's kind of a quirk in the state legislature. In the state constitution and bylaws that a lot of other states don't have. And it's a way of if you know the history of Illinois, it's a way of giving even more power to the legislators and the lobbyists and the legislative leaders. And with somebody who's lived in Illinois for 30 years, it's the Illinois way.
Okay. I almost hesitate to bring this up since it's pretty complicated. But there's another wrinkle in here that I'm thinking is significant. It's related to paying off the debt that was incurred to pay for the renovations to Soldier Field back in the early 2000s. Can you break that down in a way that doesn't require a degree in municipal financing?
Um, the quickest way to break it down is that some of the legislators and and politicians were basically trying to do what used to be a great train robbery to the Bears, and just say and try and force them to pay hundreds of millions of dollars that they have absolutely no obligation to pay, none whatsoever. Effectively, what some of these legislators were trying to do is, think about this: you rent a house, the landlord, the owner of the house, refinances the house twice. So you rent a $500,000 house, and at the end they say, okay, well, your lease is up, but in order for you to move out of the house and into another, you have to pay off the $500,000 mortgage, which I've refinanced twice while you've lived there. It was ludicrous. It was for headlines. It was a demonstration of how unserious the governor and other politicians were at the time.
Okay. So the Bears have been meeting with Illinois lawmakers, I assume, for months to get state
Years,
support. Years,
years,
okay. Well, specifically for Arlington Heights, specifically once they really
years,
settled on Arlington
years.
Heights. Uh, what has been the response from Governor Pritzker and the Illinois legislature?
uh, it the Bears put out a letter a few weeks ago, which where they said that they were told we're not going to make the project a priority in 2026, and that was also the letter where they talked about that they're going to look very seriously at Northwest Indiana, and made that public. And to Governor Braun's credit, he jumped on that. Opportunities like this don't come around often. So, you folks in Indiana have got a very foresightful political class, and whether it happens or not, it won't be for lack of effort. They saw an opportunity, and they said, "You know what? We're going to try and make this happen," and that's what they're doing right now.
Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll hear from IBJ's Mickey Shuey. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
This IBJ podcast is brought to you by Indie Grills, Indianapolis's premier builder of outdoor living spaces. They design and build custom patios, fireplaces, and outdoor kitchens made for real life, from quiet family nights to hosting the whole neighborhood. Winter's the perfect time to start planning your dream outdoor space because Indie Grill's spring schedule is already filling up. So if you're ready to elevate your outdoor space, now's the time to get in line. Start designing your dream backyard. Visit IndieGrills.com or stop by their state-of-the-art showroom at the Zionsville-Lebanon border on State Road 32.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast about the potential for the Chicago Bears to move their stadium to Indiana. Let's cut to my interview with IBJ's Mickey Shuey as we discuss the reaction in Indiana to the team's announcement that its options were widening to include the northwest portion of the state. So how did that news land in Indiana, particularly among our leaders?
Well, Governor Mike Braun is he's all about it. He wants to bring the Bears to Indiana, to Northwest Indiana, and in fact, Mayor McDermott from Hammond is also very keen on the idea. He's spoken about how the Bears could save hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes over the lifetime of a deal if they made a move to Indiana, and we know that they've been evaluating sites in Hammond and other parts of Lake County.
So how would state leaders feel about putting together an incentives deal? I mean, they got done last year with a session that was all about austerity. It was all about saving money. What potentially could they be looking at? Do we have any idea what a proposal could include?
Not entirely, but that's because a lot of them are staying mum on that topic of what that structure might look like. Now, important to note that House Speaker Todd Huston, who's a Republican from Fishers, he's repeatedly said that he and other legislative leaders don't want to appropriate additional funding to make this deal possible if it comes to fruition. He said, and I'm quoting here, "I think there are things that we can do to address Hoosier concerns. But once you crack that state budget open, it becomes a challenge on a whole lot of different levels." When asked whether lawmakers could put together an incentive package for the Bears this session without directly appropriating dollars, Houston did say yes.
Okay.
And that could be enabled through a number of different tools that the state has at its disposal. And those include things like tax increment financing districts, which are very popular in areas that are kind of prime for new development and could bring in an influx of new property tax. You could also use a professional sports development area designation, which has been used for a few different projects here in Indianapolis. Fishers has a new PSDA, and those essentially gather a whole lot of different taxes, local and state taxes, ranging from income to sales to, you could throw admissions tax in there if you want to, and even possibly property tax. But that's a designation that would have to be approved by the state budget committee. And additionally, the IEDC, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, has a number of incentives it could use for business relocation and site development. Among them, the Indiana Legislature in 2022 created this thing called an Innovation Development District. And that basically allows the state to capture state and local tax revenue to fund improvements and incentives at specific sites. It would essentially act as a state-based TIF district. That's kind of how it operates, where the state controls it rather than the local municipality.
Yeah, and here's the thing that has convinced some people that this is not a smokescreen. There have been apparently substantive meetings between the Bears, the governor, local mayors. Can you give me a sense of what do we know about the contact that has been made?
Yeah, so since mid-December, the Bears have evaluated multiple sites in Indiana, and they met with state and local leaders, including Braun, Governor Mike Braun, and Hammond Mayor Tom McDermott, as well as a select few state lawmakers, such as Mishler and Houston. They've also toured multiple prospective stadium sites, and in some cases, they were reportedly joined by NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell as recently as last week.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, the team also has sent out a survey to season ticket holders, basically gauging their interest for a stadium campus in Northwest Indiana. And that questionnaire referred to an unspecified stadium and mixed-use development site.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like there is one site that they're looking at. They're potential sites.
Right. So sources have told our sister publication, Inside Indiana Business, that they've been shown at least 5 locations in the region, including a property at Wolf Lake in Hammond near the state line. So sources have told our sister publication, Inside Indiana Business, that the team has been shown at least 5 locations within the region that they've taken interest in. That includes a property at Wolf Lake in Hammond near the state line, and one not far from BP's massive refinery in Whiting, where crews have actually been seen drilling and testing.
Now, as you said before, it seems like within the last several days, the tone from Governor Pritzker and the state capitol has changed a little bit. What are we hearing now?
So that's absolutely true. I mean, we've seen from Publications Illinois that Governor Pritzker has said specifically that he feels there is some optimism that a deal on infrastructure could be crafted this session. And that's the operative phrase there, this session, because previously they were saying that maybe we could make a deal, but it's not going to be this year. Now they seem very willing to come back to the table this year, with Indiana kind of being in the mix now. And then you have Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Welch, who also said that the legislature is willing to talk about infrastructure. And he did not rule out some kind of legislation coming related to property tax relief, such as a pilot.
Gotcha. When I first heard this in December, I mean, this was news to me. I was thinking, how could the Bears be in Indiana? It doesn't make sense. But there is precedence for an NFL team to be located outside the state that it's named for.
The Washington Commanders, it's named for Washington, D.C., but the team plays its home games at Commanders Field in Landover, Maryland, and its facilities are in Virginia, Ashburn, Virginia. And then you have the New York Giants and the New York Jets. And of course, both teams are named for New York, but they also both play their home games at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So
Got it.
you have that, and then you've also got the Kansas City Chiefs, who will still kind of be within their namesake, but they're moving from Kansas City, Missouri to Kansas City, Kansas, that area at least.
And this is relatively recent, and this decision to move. And this has been, I feel like, is kind of just playing very audibly in the background, showing that, it is possible for, an area that has hosted a team for many years to lose it to an area that, that's basically just like across the river.
Right. I mean, they definitely, like, this has definitely kind of been an undercurrent for this whole situation. And I think it certainly gives credence to the idea that Chicago Bears could be the region Bears, the Northwest Indiana Bears, and perhaps not in name, but in spirit.
Yes, we will not sully the name of the Chicago Bears in such a way. But I get it. So Governor Braun gave his second State of the State address Wednesday night, and we caught wind fairly early that he was going to talk about the Bears, though it was kind of hard to figure out what exactly he was going to say. What did he actually end up saying?
Well, not much, but the fact that he mentioned it, experts have told me, is very significant because, well, there seemed to be no question about his conviction about going after the team in the first place. To mention something in a State of the State address is kind of taking it to the next level. So he gave the team a shout out. He basically said that they're working hard to bring the Bears in, and cited what he believes are kind of the driving factors, which is the state's business-friendly tax climate, environment, and the opportunity to have a second NFL team is something he very clearly is taking seriously.
Yeah. So he's affirming what has been said in the past,
Correct.
Which is, we're going to try our darndest to make this happen because we think it's important.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's important to note that he also had Hammond Mayor McDermott as a guest at the State of the State.
Gotcha. Okay. Now let's hear again from Mark Gannis about Illinois' reaction to the Bears' interest in Indiana.
That, of course, had a reaction, not a surprise, in the state legislature of Illinois, which was, not only might we lose the team, but everybody loves the way this team is playing now. This team has captured everybody's attention. It's front page news. Caleb Williams, Coach Johnson, they're winning games, 7 games, 8 games, comeback wins this year. Everybody loves this team. Whoa, this is a locomotive. Are we going to get blamed for having this team go to Indiana? Now, Northwest Indiana is just a suburb of Chicago also. It's part of the Chicagoland area. But I think they realized they were overplaying their hand, and have gotten some seriousness about maybe we ought to take another look at this and not wait until after 2026, when it might not make it through February of 26.
So Governor Braun, at the State of the State address on Wednesday, gave at least a shout out to the Bears, and just wanted to impress on everybody how serious Indiana was in pursuing the team. And then on Thursday, the state introduced legislation that would create, I say specifically two legislators introduced legislation that would create a Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority authorized to acquire land, finance capital improvements, enter into leases with private entities, which of course would include an NFL team. And it was co-authored by Senator Ryan Mishler, who said it's supposed to set a framework as they continue discussions throughout the rest of the legislative session on the possibility of bringing the Bears to Northwest Indiana. And then the Bears said this legislation is a significant milestone in our discussions about a potential stadium development. Bottom line, do you think this proposed legislation brings the Bears any closer to Indiana?
Oh, I think it's exactly what the Bears said it is. It's a milestone. It is a major step. If the Bears are to come to Indiana, this is a major step to make that happen. Think about what happened in Kansas City with Kansas City Chiefs and the state of Kansas. The state of Kansas legislature passed what they call star bonds, legislation for star bonds, stadium and something revenue bonds. And I forgot what the acronym is for STAR. And that had to be done before a lease agreement was negotiated. And so the legislature moved and enacted, and it ultimately led to an agreement where the Kansas City Chiefs are now moving across state lines, not dissimilar to what's being talked about here, to Kansas, again, to a suburb of Kansas City. It gets a little confusing with the name Kansas, Kansas City, Kansas, and the state of Kansas and Missouri. Point being, it's very similar to what's being discussed here by the state of Indiana.
Yeah, it seems like that would make the threat more real.
Oh,
Anybody watching?
Definitely, absolutely. It makes the reality more real, also, if it's to happen.
Mm. So, under the language of the bill, which we just really got a first look at yesterday, it would create the stadium authority. The authority would function as the owner of the new stadium, while the team would pay for repairs and operational costs. It would give the authority the power to issue bonds to buy the land and pay for construction. Now, I thought that the Bears wanted to build their own stadium instead of be a tenant. Do you think the Bears are amenable to that kind of arrangement?
I'd rather be a tenant in a publicly owned stadium than be the owner of the stadium if I own the team. It is you don't have to deal with property tax issues. You wind up if you have control of the building. Think about the teams in the NFL. Most of them don't own their own stadiums. Most of them are in the structure that is in the Indiana legislation. That's the way it is. It's the minority of stadiums that are owned by the teams themselves.
Now, in the interval between the time that I talked to you earlier this morning about scheduling this interview and right now, two fairly major things have happened. So one, the business journal Crane Chicago Business reported today, Friday, January 16th, that the mayor of Arlington Heights had issued a blunt open letter to Illinois legislators that they need to stop dragging their feet or the Bears will leave. And specifically, he's talking about passing the bill that would bring long-term predictability to property taxes on large developments. And the mayor staged a news conference alongside other Arlington Heights elected officials and leadership from the three school districts that rely on property taxes. This struck me as being a pretty persuasive event in terms of indicating the risk of losing the Bears. If the mayor is going to stage a press conference with the different taxing authorities, how does that strike you?
It's not unexpected. I mean, the Bears have made great headway with the taxing authorities in the area. At first, they were holding them up. The way this began, the taxing authorities were charging more for the land when it was raised, when the racetrack no longer existed, than when the racetrack was operating as a racetrack, which was ridiculous. But they were, they were trying to hold up the Bears. The bottom line is they were just trying to collect more money, not because it actually was worth more, but because they just thought they could. And that backfired on them. And that set him back, to be perfectly honest. That also made it very clear to the Bears they had to get property tax certainty because they couldn't trust the taxing bodies not to do this after they sunk $2 or $3 billion into the ground. So,
and that's a potential cost of the stadium itself, the 2.3 billion. I'm sorry,
correct.
$2 or $3 billion.
Exactly. I think by the time it's done, it'll be closer to 3. But then they came to agreement about 18 months ago or so on what the property tax would be while the land was empty. And so parties all started working together in Arlington Heights, including the school districts, because you have to recognize school districts need more money if you're generating more children for the schools. Stadiums don't generate more students for school. It just doesn't happen. You just don't have a lot of families living in the stadium that have a lot of school children that go to 3rd grade. It just doesn't happen. So reality prevailed, and so this does not surprise me that they've done this. But you have to keep something in mind. Illinois is a supermajority Democrat state, and most of the legislators in the Arlington Heights area are Republicans. So they only have so much influence in Springfield.
Gotcha. One other development, IBJ reported today that one of the city's largest law firms, Taft, you guys have a Taft in Chicago, but there's a Taft everywhere. Actually, Taft is also the sponsor of this podcast, come to think of it. They filed paperwork to lobby for the Chicago Bears with the Indiana legislature. First, why would the Bears need a lobbyist?
Well, first it would indicate the Bears are serious to work with the legislature to have the final legislation be what they're looking for. So it makes perfect sense that the Bears would hire. They have lobbyists working in Springfield. So it would make perfect sense that they would have lobbyists working in Indiana as well. So I think it's an indication of seriousness on their part.
You brought this up a few minutes ago, and I think a lot of fans wonder this. Let's say the Bears win their playoff game against the Rams on Sunday. Okay, that puts them in the NFC Championship game. Let's say they make it to the Super Bowl. Is it conceivable that the team going to the Super Bowl would then turn around and then the legislature would not want to cut some kind of deal with them to keep them in Illinois?
I've seen stranger things happen around here, meaning Chicago and Illinois. I've seen things that make no sense all of a sudden become reality. They under Rahm Emanuel, they approved a multi-$100 million arena to be built next to McCormick Place. That was completely unnecessary. But, if the right people with the right lobbyists and the right law firms step up, I've seen Chicago sell its parking meters for 99 years, use all the money within the first 6 years, and then have to start paying the parking meter company because they needed to take streets out of commission because of construction or to fix the streets. We had the Skyway, which goes to Indiana. I've seen Chicago sell the Skyway and have to pay the Skyway owners for. Listen, around here, you never know. You just never know. It's, Sean Connery had that great line. That's the Chicago way in The Untouchables. Around here, you just never know. When there's a great story about when the White Sox stadium, the White Sox were going to move to St. Petersburg, and there was legislation, and Big Jim Thompson was on the floor. Michael Madigan was the Speaker of the House. The legislature it was by law, Constitution, ending at midnight. They didn't have enough votes. Michael Madigan was able to stop time, literally stop time. What was it, 15, 20 minutes to get the last vote or two, got it approved at 11:59. On the rest of the world's clock, it was 12:20, but not in Illinois. So you just never know what happens around here.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty persuasive argument. Well, Mark, this has been fantastic perspective. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
My thanks again to Mark Gannis and Mickey Shuey. And folks, this story is moving so fast that I have 2 new developments to mention since interviewing Mark on Friday afternoon, January 16th. First, the city of Gary, Indiana, has muscled its way into consideration for the stadium, formally pitching 3 sites, ranging in site from 145 to 760 acres, where the Bears Stadium could land. And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said Friday that the debt still held on the renovation of Soldier Field in the early 2000s isn't standing in the way of the state coming to terms with the Bears. And he said, quote, "I just want to be clear that the actual financial responsibility for that debt does not fall on the Bears," end quote. IBJ has stories on both of these developments at IBJ.com. I'd also like to thank the staff of Crane Chicago Business for sharing some of their reporting with us. If anybody remembers reporter John Pletz from his distinguished tenure at IBJ in the late 1990s, know that he's covering the story from the Chicago side for Cranes. The one thing that I can't tell you is the winner of the Bears playoff game against the Rams on Sunday night. It'll be interesting to see how the outcome affects the stadium talks, if at all. There are a few stories in this week's edition of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, Indiana-based Guardian Bikes makes its bicycles in the United States, and it recently proposed to the feds that some of the primary materials in imported bicycles be subject to an additional 50% tariff. Daniel Lee reports that this has put Guardian at odds with much of the bicycle industry. Also in this week's issue, Mark Mazurek unpacks proposed legislation that would allow businesses to get electricity from a provider other than their local utility company. And Daniel Bradley gets the lowdown on the celebrity chef who opened Clutch Kitchen this month in the Yard at Fisher's District. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or, of course, online at IBJ.com. I will say it's quite a bit easier to access all the latest local business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business community and economy if you're a subscriber. We're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months, just to get a sense of how valuable and original our content is. Just go to IBJ.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.